How have you handled feedback that this is too complicated, it's too complex?
They're like, why would you build on proof of work? Proof of work is archaic. Like, just use proof of stake. We certainly did not follow the mainstream consensus. But unfortunately, we've just been stubborn and steadfast that proof of work is one of the only ways to build a decentralized system. And at the end point, I think I can actually prove that it's the only way to build a scalable system. It's described in one equation, which is delta S is equal to 1 over 2 to the n. Everything just collapses into simplicity at its root, but efficient emergent complexity in its manifestation. Everybody is like self-serving. You have to be like very careful no matter what people say. It is only the mechanisms in the system that like matter. It's the market mechanisms, it's like the lock mechanisms, it's the algorithms. And unless like behavior is enforced by those mechanisms, you cannot depend on any outcome that is potentially promised or implied.
Show me the incentives and I'll show you the outcome.
You cannot trust anybody. The point of this system isn't to be fair, because we live in an unfair world. It's not about fairness, it's about effectiveness.
Welcome back to another episode of Cypherpunk'd, where we explore money's history, crypto's future, and Web3's role in advancing human rights, freedom, and digital liberty. Today's guest is Dr. K, the CTO of Quai Network. This is episode 5 in our series on Quai. Welcome to the pod.
Appreciate having me.
It's been an adventure. Today, for this episode, we are going to talk about FUD, complaints, and lessons you've learned as a founder and a co-founder of Quai and CTO of Quai. So I think this is a good one to do to gather some introspection. I'm sure you've learned a lot rolling out many testnets and dealing with community controversies and all sorts of stuff. I mean, it's all part of the project of launching a decentralized network. So with that being said, let's dive right in. Every innovative project faces skepticism. What were some of the most common criticisms or doubts you've heard about Quai Network, and how have you addressed them?
I think the biggest general overarching one is that proof of work is no longer relevant. Which, probably isn't controversial in a more sort of Bitcoin-oriented audience, isn't something that you need to dispel, I guess would be the point in a Bitcoin-oriented audience. But if you talk to like VCs, they're like, why would you build on proof of work? Proof of work is archaic. Like, just use proof of stake. Oh, the blockchain trilemma has been solved. Look at Solana. Oh, look, OP stack is like all you need. Just like launch another layer 2. Right. So if you're talking about sort of what at whatever level is mainstream crypto, we certainly did not follow the mainstream consensus in trying to build a system that significantly advances the functionality of a proof of work based system. That like was completely counter sort of cultural or narrative to whatever the mainstream sort of zeitgeist is of the system. And in some ways we found the people that, were more aligned with proof of work and understood why that was a valuable thing to do. And we basically just ignored most other people, because if that's like your standpoint coming in, you probably aren't somebody that you can be readily rationalized with. I would say that's probably the primary criticism. So unfortunately, we've just been stubborn and steadfast that proof of work is one of the only ways to build a decentralized system. And at the end point, I think I can actually prove that it's the only way to build a scalable system. So I'm pretty happy with our choice still, even though it didn't necessarily resonate with everybody. But I guess we'll see how that plays out, obviously.
What about the idea? I mean, you guys introduced a lot of novel concepts like POEM and this dual token model with Quai and Chi. How have you handled feedback that this is too complicated, it's too complex, too difficult to understand?
So with POEM, as a Bitcoiner, and an early participant in the system and someone who studied consensus and taught the first graduate class on blockchain at University of Texas, these systems were not formalized by academics, and there was basically sort of this intuition that was developed in understanding proof of work and what it means and how it works. And that intuition that sort of was developed within, say, Bitcoin talk is largely correct. When I came up with Poem, it was a requirement to get the sharding to work without bound, so you need this proper relief causal invariance. However, that step definitely rubs counterintuitive to the intuitive understanding that's largely held by sort of the open source consensus developers and participants. The way that we went about dealing with that is we worked with a company called Common Prefix, and we actually came up with a formalized set of papers that mathematically proves that Poem is indeed better in terms of finalization speed and security in a work-based system compared to, the heaviest chain rule and Ghost for that matter. And then we also showed that in a second paper with work shares, it actually brings the system into Nash equilibrium. So in terms of dispelling that, we did that through the process of, formal mathematical proving. But I still think many people don't fully understand or internalize what we've shown.
It is very complicated. I mean, it probably goes over most people's head, and I can tell that you've really thought about it deeply. But
so the interesting thing about it is it's not actually complicated itself. The entirety of the system is described in one equation, which is delta S is equal to 1 over 2 to the n. And that one equation with 4 parameters, if you were to give that prompt to 2 different competent engineers and they understood the prompt, I think they would arguably design the exact same system. So everything about the system, everything about this incentive design, everything about the architecture of the system, I think is technically downstream of that one equation. So the equation itself is very simple. The emergent behaviors and incentives that come out of that equation, the architecture that comes from that equation, is emergently complex, but the idea itself is actually incredibly simple because it fundamentally represents the nature of the physical process. And the interesting thing is I didn't start at that equation. I ended up ending at that equation. But once I got there, I realized that that was the equation that defines the whole system, but I had to go find it.
Mm-hmm.
So I get that there's a lot of complexity or apparent complexity when we talk about the system, because we're not actually talking about the design of the system. We're talking about the emergent complexities of the incentives that come from the system, not the design of the system itself. So in our consensus code, for example, the actual code that's doing all this work to create this hierarchy of merge mine chains is fundamentally manifest in about 400 lines. It's only 400 lines of code that's doing the bulk of this work. They're just very artfully created 400 lines of code. And to get them to work correctly, you had to get to that fundamental understanding of that equation. And then everything just collapses into simplicity at its root, but efficient emergent complexity in its manifestation.
What have been the biggest challenges with the community? Are there things that you think you guys could have done better with the community? Communication-wise, what's been the biggest issue that you can think of?
Yes. So when you're building a project like this, right, there's many people, that you have to have on the team, and you sort of have to delegate certain functions to those people because you all have to accomplish different goals to bring people on board. I have always, within the team, been a proponent of trying to find a small number of sort of high value converts. The marketing and activities that we did were not necessarily focused on that for a couple years.
Yeah.
As we were approaching or developing the system, that I think is regrettable. for us, because although we got more awareness, I don't know how many long-term conversions we got because we weren't targeting sort of the proper value-added demographic.
Yeah.
So that is like a regret that I have. I think it got us some things in terms of like awareness in a very noisy space.
Yeah.
But I don't think it got us other things that would have been helpful that we would have gotten if we were if we took a different strategy. I've been making content for pretty consistently for almost 2 years.
Yeah. No, you make great videos.
Like doing technical deep dives, because those are focused at trying to elicit, value added conversions to what we're trying to do. And also get people to participate in the community. So we have like very like strong and very smart community members that, there's a couple that come to mind. We had one in France called Simon. We have one, in India called Kishore. We have another one in Russia called Kiri, and they're all like smart, people. On the way over today, someone texted me because there's this like bounty out for proofs on causal invariance that the Wolfram team put out to try to show like causal invariance within Poem, like formally prove it. And it was an interesting text because it asked a question, which was, if the difficulty controller is dependent on time, doesn't that technically break the causal invariance of the system? And the answer is interesting, because on an instantaneous basis it does not, but on a longer time frame basis it does. But the importance of causal invariance is only instantaneous. So, like from a strict formalization standpoint, you could say yes, it indeed breaks causal invariance. But from a sort of engineering standpoint, it doesn't, because over the time frame in which causal invariance matters, it doesn't break causal invariance. It only breaks it like on this long thing where sort of consensus has already happened. So like the out window doesn't matter. That being said, I guess the point here is I think we've done a good job of finding some relatively high-powered intellectual converts, though I think we could have done a better job of that. I also think that when we launched, probably one of our bad decisions was we had these like social media rewards, and we're always saying like in the social media rewards, we're going to have this like this vesting period. So we're going to have like a cliff plus a vest. And we got like a bunch of pushback from the community, and they're like, no, you shouldn't like vest your rewards and blah, blah, blah. And I kind of like I gave in, I guess would be the point, and we ended up not vesting that. And I think that negatively impacted the initial market and the supply. So, looking back on that, we should have just stayed strict to the original plan, which was like, a longer vesting cycle. That's a mistake. But, in that, one of the things that happened as, we were sort of negotiating with market makers and negotiating with exchanges, one of the lessons you learn, and even, you're technically doing a negotiation with your community when they're like, oh, we don't want our rewards to vest. Everybody is like self-serving.
Yeah.
So you have to be like very careful no matter what people say. It is only the mechanisms in the system that like matter. It's the market mechanisms, it's like the lock mechanisms, it's the algorithms. And unless like behavior is enforced by those mechanisms, you cannot depend on any outcome that is potentially promised or implied. So that's maybe an lesson outcome from that, which is you cannot trust anybody.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I'm trying to think, as being part of the community, I've been involved in many proof of work communities, and I've seen horrendous things. I've seen good things. I've seen all sorts of things. Some of the critiques I have and some of the thoughts that I have, I'll kind of run it by you, see what your thoughts are and what your response is there. Which goes into, I personally think like, I understand like the whole vesting thing. as long as it's communicated ahead of time, I think like, hey, like this is what you signed up for. What I don't like is, hey, like this isn't going to vest, and then all of a sudden now it's going to vest. And I think there was some of that recently. I know that we've got some of the different waves, or I haven't really been fully paying attention. I know that there was some mine stuff and something. If you participated in the testnet, like we mined in the testnet, I think there was like these claims or whatever, the phase 1. Maybe you can explain all that?
Yeah. So we did announce like the vesting for all of the things well beforehand, like before people did the actions and participated. So the concept of having like vesting on the social media claims like goes back.
So social media claims, yeah,
like
correct.
Year and a half. Yeah. And then the concept on the mined rewards is there's no vesting. It's just you have to wait for your claim to process. And so we had to like lay out a claim period, and then the claim period for sort of the first claim like had to happen before we could write the Genesis block, and then the second claim, and then the third claim. And so we've gone through like wave 2. And then I think it's still pending on like the third wave of claims for the pre-Genesis activities. But those should like they go out like 100,000 Quai a day or something. And so those should finish soon.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
What was I going to ask you? Vesting.
Yeah. The confusion for vesting is that we changed the vesting for the social media program, and then after wave 1, we're like, oh, that was a fucking terrible.
It's hard to keep.
And then we changed it back.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Is what happened. But like originally, if we just hadn't fucking caved,
you should have just.
That was like the lesson. We shouldn't just cave. We should just say like, okay, this is what we said we're gonna do. This is what we're gonna do. And like changing the decision was bad, and then we had to change it back.
Yeah, that was bad.
That's like what happened.
That's bad. Yeah.
So
I mean, in my mind of like, just give the fucking people their coins, let them do what they're going to do, and just leave it at that, right? It's better just to get it done with, sooner rather than later. At least that's my take on the matter. The other thing was, I know some people who mined in the testnet and like, I guess they can't claim anymore, like expired. They lost their chance to do that.
So we gave everybody 30 days. Well, I think it was longer than that. It was 30 days after Genesis to claim. So it was a total of like 6 weeks, like window during launch that like people had to claim. But like fundamentally we had to, have a period by which time like, it was resolved and we could shut it off and move on.
You have to deal with it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Was there
messaging about that ahead of time though, that like you have this window to claim? I guess is my question. I personally am involved like so many different things. I claimed it. I just didn't like, I saw people complaining in the chat like, oh, I can't claim anymore, and furious, right? Like obviously it came after the window. So
in terms of the people that mined, there was a very high compliance to claiming.
Yeah, I'm sure most people did.
No, it was like 95+%.
Yeah.
Like so the people that like actually put money into the system like all claimed. The people that were like furious about the claims were like the social media participants who were like, I like missed my window and like I did some tweets like a year ago and like, where's my money?
Yeah.
So like, I'm not like, it happens if you want to like be a part of the project, especially on the social media side, like keep up with the project, right? We announced that stuff like, you had like a 2.5 month period where that was like known. And then you had this like 6-week period to do it. So
what's up with
that? Sympathetic to it
with the KYC and all the stuff that came with it. Obviously, people were not happy about that. I personally wasn't happy about it, but I understand like there's legal.
I mean, it's just very straightforward. We're an American project. We have to comply with American rules, and downstream, ability to get listing and to do deals with market makers requires that you had that KYC process for those distributions. Even
though it was for actual like proof of work mining activity?
Yeah, because it was pre-mainnet. Obviously, like post-mainnet, you mining is the process that's decentralized and open. So obviously, you don't have a KYC requirement by its nature, but legally we had to comply with that because of, KYC AML things.
That's what your lawyer said to do.
Yeah, that's what the lawyer said to do. And at the end of the day, you need to be compliant with the laws in the jurisdictions in which you operate. The cool part of proof of work is that you're creating an open system, and once that system is launched, as long as it's within the rules of the system, like it will happen regardless of what things exist, don't exist, or may change.
So the logic, which is like you guys basically had to be the third party to distribute that. Is that kind of the logic there?
Yeah, that's right.
It's just kind of like
that's right. So
incentive.
That's right. So like if the system was like codified and it was mined and like the testnet somehow like rolled, which we couldn't do for like many technical reasons, you wouldn't have that problem. But because we were involved in that, like that's why we had to KYC.
What about these? The other thing I can think of is there was like node runners or something that got to mine first.
That is like the worst one of the FUD. Okay,
so it's gonna fucking hang over you, and it was like not that significant of a deal. That's why.
So like okay, so like let's just talk about this. It's 100% a technically driven decision. Okay, so the problem is when you launch a network where it's like highly anticipated, you can't handle the ingress of the number of nodes that want to come online instantaneously. Like that's the statement. Like it's just like a problem. So what you need to do is you need to get a system where like you have enough infra that like replication can take place. But like we can't spin up, hundreds of nodes on our own that are replicates because like that's tons of money, right? So what we do is we have the seed nodes, and when we launched, I want to say we had like 10 like seeders basically. And so what we did is we started the seed nodes, we made sure everything was stable, and then we said, okay, all these participants that have like been part of what we call the node wranglers, who are people that
node wranglers
know how to run infrastructure and did a good job keeping infrastructure up and updated in testnet as measured by them participating in our stats dashboard. And like if we did updates and like the node wranglers didn't update, like we kicked them out of like the node wrangler group. So this was like an earned spot. And if you didn't get there, like we would kick you out. But the reason we had them is because in the third testnet, when we launched, there was just too much fucking demand, and like we couldn't handle the replication.
So this was based off of like testing things in testnets and learning.
Oh, like the launch of the third testnet like broke like a motherfucker because like we had so many people wanting to participate, and like we couldn't do it. And like it was a straight clusterfuck. And so what we figured out is we need like this replication process to like scale. You can't just like turn 2,000 nodes online and expect the shit to like work correctly. Like it just wasn't happening. And so by having it go from like 10 to like 100, once you get to like 100, that's like enough that like the anticipated demand was such that like replication could happen and it wouldn't sort of overwhelm like the peer-to-peer layer and limitations of the system.
Could this be a problem in the future at any point, or are we kind of like once you get past that initial hurdle, you're good?
No, once you get past the initial hurdle, you're good. It's just like you can do replication, but you can't like instantaneously do replication at like 100x. So like you only can do replication at like 10x. Right. So you just have to like do it in 2 steps.
Got it.
And so we learned this lesson from the third testnet, and we implemented it in the fourth testnet, and it went fucking beautifully. And we're like, okay, we're
gonna do this on mainnet.
Do the same thing in mainnet. And so the earned spot, we told people like, we're going to release the nonce to you. Don't share it amongst yourselves. You're going to get a day as the reward for like demonstrating that you can run infrastructure, and you're going to provide the initial infrastructure with the system for 24 hours. And then after 24 hours, we released the nonce broadly, and then everybody can mine. But the point was just to get enough nodes online that when the new nodes came in, like it wouldn't crash like the system because there was enough replicates to like provide all the data. And that's why they got the 24 hours. It wasn't like there was like some crazy period wherein the difficulty was like super easy for them. The difficulty in the first 24 hours was like similar to the difficulty in the next 24 hours. So it was just they got 1 extra day of mining. It wasn't like they got anything huge. They just got 1 extra day. And there was an implicit technical purpose to that, which is you want to smoothly turn on the system that's highly anticipated. And that's how we figured out how to do it. I mean...
And this was communicated ahead of time?
Oh, way ahead of time.
Yeah, okay.
Way ahead of time. I mean, we came up with this in the third testnet, so this was like known for like a year.
Gotcha.
And then we like told everybody, we're like, you're going to potentially get benefits. And we gave them an early benefit in the next testnet, and then we gave them an early benefit in mainnet. So it was really just like, how do you turn on a decentralized system in like a smooth way? And like, that's how we figured out how to do it. It wasn't meant to like truly advantage anybody in any meaningful way.
The only other one that I can think of, FUD wise, would be like tokenomics. Like, hey, the like we looked it over, I think in episode 3, but all these there's different groups of people who get tokens before it's like a pre-mine essentially. How do you respond to that?
Yeah, I mean, if I thought that a quote unquote fair mine, which I don't think that fair mining is actually fair in many cases.
I mean, of course, it's not a perfect system. It's the best system we got.
Well, but more importantly, like, what is the definition of fair?
Yeah,
it's like this highly subjective idea. But like, if I didn't know about Bitcoin in 2009, like, is that fair?
Yeah, I mean, you can almost feel when something's fair. It's almost like, what is the actual definition? It's like this gray area sometimes.
Well, but
what's fair to you might be different to me, but most people kind of have a feeling of it, you know?
Right. Yeah. There's like a feeling of it, but I think if you're critical to the concept of, you know, a fair launch being a mining thing, I don't think it's as fair as many people say it to be. I think that's like a great marketing term, but I don't think it's technically fair. But more importantly, regardless of your definition of fair, that's not the point. Like, the point of this system isn't to be fair, because we live in an unfair world. So like, why do you have a pre-mine? Why do you have a foundation? It's an implicit recognition that we live in an unfair world. And if I go in there with a fair mindset, it puts the protocol on a back foot to be able to like use resources to spur adoption and attract capital. So like, the point of all of those things is to become effective. So it's not about fairness, it's about effectiveness. And if you can be effective, you can suck more capital into the system, you can make it more useful, and you can benefit everybody to the greatest degree. So fairness is not, in my opinion, the ideal path to get to ubiquitous adoption. I think at this stage in the world, you need to plan something that is gauged toward being effective, but not necessarily.
Ideally, you want to be as effective as possible while being as fair as possible. That's the way I think about it.
I think that's probably a true statement, but the sort of extreme endpoint of no pre-mined tokens, I don't think approaches the effective path.
Yeah, I think aside from Bitcoin, it's hard to have that immaculate conception, you know, it just kind of worked. But even with Ethereum, there's pre-mine, and, you know,
I mean, like Caspa did, you know, a quote unquote fair launch. But if you look at like the number of mining participants for the first year, questionable how fair that was.
I mean, I mined Caspa early, so I thought it was pretty fair, but I hear what you're saying.
There
was some funny business going on with like the actual initial supply or something. I read something about it a while ago. It was kind of like, you know, can you actually prove that all the coins existed initially, or was there something funky going on? I don't know. But
yeah, but I like the Caspa guys. I think like in this world, 99.9% of crypto is like horseshit. But
got some
like
cool technical things that I'm sure that you appreciate.
No, but like, I think they're very honest actors, and I think they're taking like a good approach. If you look at like Quai and Caspa, they're very similar in many ways, right? The difference is Caspa is an unordered DAG, whereas a strictly ordered DAG. But within our strictly ordered DAG, we're also using work shares to get sort of faster measurements, which they're doing through many blocks. So we have many work shares, they have many blocks, but the difference is they don't have sharding. So maybe they go to like 1,000 TPS, but once they hit 1,000 TPS, or maybe it's 2,000 TPS, there's some number that's finite, at which point their system saturates and it like can't scale past that. What we're basically saying is we know that in a single chain or DAG, you can't scale, ergo you must have sharding. So our feature is we can add sharding. And then the other thing is, because we're in an ordered DAG, we can support account-based smart contracting system, which is implicitly sort of impossible based off how things reordered in an unstructured DAG. So that's like there's a lot of similitudes, but the difference is EVM compatible, sharding to go higher in scale than just one system, and we have Qi. So like those are like the three main differentiating points if I like were to compare the two, but I think they're very smart, honest, and well-motivated people in the ecosystem in terms of what they're trying to accomplish. So a lot of respect for those guys. But there's very few projects that I have a lot of respect for. So yeah.
Fascinating. What, I guess we can close out here with this final question. What have been the most valuable lessons you've learned while building Quai that might help other builders in the space?
Don't trust anybody. There's actually a statement about tokens as well. When you do token allocations, you should create a requirement to buy, much like an option. So if you work for a company, and you have shares or like some upside, it usually manifests as a form of an option. And your shares vest. And then if you leave, if you don't buy your vested shares at like the option value that they were given when they were granted, when you leave, you lose them. But the archetypical token agreements don't have that clause. So people can leave and they maintain their vested tokens even though they don't have to purchase the option. So you should actually structure the agreement that when people leave, they have to purchase the tokens at the prevalent grant rate, effectively exercise the option when they do it.
Interesting.
That would be like, I would structure the token deal much like typical equity option deals for incentives. That would be like a strong recommendation. There might be issues with that if like you go into the lawyers and they're like, oh, fucking securities and this, that, and the other. Like, I don't know. But from an incentives perspective, you should try to structure the token deal similar to the equity options structure that's sort of ubiquitously used within startups. That would be like a great recommendation.
I think with the new administration in power and the openness that they're having towards, with the new SEC chair and Paul Atkins, and he's talked a lot about this, and potential Congress acting on some legislation, I think we might have more potential to further align incentives in the way that you're describing. And I do see that happening within the next couple of years. It really does look like that's possible. So I think it's a good idea.
So that would be a recommendation. I would also make the recommendation to always hire and fire quickly. I think that's just like a generic startup recommendation in some ways. So like if you know that someone's not performing, like give them one or two chances, but like if it ain't happening, like fire faster, because like you don't have the time and the resource in the startup to waste and like let it like hang for a couple months or half a year. Like fire quickly, always be hiring, like look for the best people, incentivize the best people. And that's just like generic startup advice. The other one that I would say too is that everybody, when you're launching a protocol, however much they talk, they're not fully aligned with the incentives of the protocol. Most people are highly self-serving, especially in crypto. And that goes for the VCs, that goes for the market makers, and that goes for the exchanges. So unless it's enforced by math, like in the system, you have no guarantee that it's going to happen. And the most likely outcome is the thing that benefits that party the most, or they perceive it to benefit them the most, is what's going to happen. So they might be like, oh yeah, like we're going to support you, or like, we're not going to sell our tokens. Well, if there's no fucking mechanism in the system for that, it's not in a contract, like it isn't going to ultimately happen. So like,
show me the incentives and I'll show you the outcome.
Well, it's just, VCs can like talk a good game and they can be like, oh, we'll do this, that, and the other. If it's not in black and white, like it ain't going to happen. If you don't have a black and white or mathematically enforceable requirement against tokens and they're like, oh, we're not going to sell them, and then they sell them, like you didn't have the requirement. So like everyone in the industry, you don't know what their like long midterm view is. And many of them will say things and then not fulfill them. So like just trust no one. And verify everything. And then the last thing I would say is just because people say you need to do something, you don't need to do it. So they'll be like, oh, you got to get a Chainlink integration. Chainlink's like, well, I want $1 million.
Is that what Chainlink said?
Maybe it's like a big number.
Really?
I
should be integrating with anybody and everybody just to integrate.
Right. I don't know if that's exactly Chainlink was one of the more egregious. I don't know if that's the right number.
Yeah. That's disappointing. I'm a fan of Chainlink and what they're building, but yeah, they shouldn't be, doing that.
Yeah. And so in everything, you want to be like very cognizant of the deals that you're trying to strike and what you're actually getting out of the deals. Mm-hmm. So one thing that like happens in crypto a lot is everyone's like, let's strike like all the deals. Mm-hmm. Right. And they're just like deals, like announcements, partnership. Don't get distracted and waste your time on ones that you don't think are material long-term value adds. Mm-hmm. Like just don't. It's not worth your time, not worth your money, not worth your effort, not worth your like intellectual mind share. Just if it doesn't make sense, you can't figure out how it rationally adds long-term value to the system, don't do it. Just don't.
I think that's great advice.
So like a lot of this happens though. It's kind of like the archetype within DeFi. It's just like, let's make a bunch of noise and like, don't ask where the yield comes from. And like, let's lock up capital. Well, what are we doing with that locked up capital? I don't know, increasing our TVL, right? But like, we have no real plan or like sustainable like concept here about like what that's for. So like, I just, and maybe I'm wrong on some pieces of this, and maybe we would have done better.
I don't think anybody's right on every piece of everything. So it's inevitable you're going to be wrong on some of it. But
yeah, I mean,
I think it's great advice. I can't see what you're wrong on here.
Right. So like we were like encouraged to be like, just offer yield for like people staking Bitcoin. And I'd be like, okay, well, what are we going to like get?
Where's that yield
coming from? And like, what is it doing in the system? They're like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
TVL.
Yeah.
And it's like, like what the fuck? Like we're like anyway. There's like situations like that happen all the time in crypto, and it kind of goes back to like the concept of do you need a token? Mm-hmm. Never launch a token if you can absolutely utterly avoid it. Like just don't fucking do it. If there's any other way to accomplish what you want without launching a token, do not launch a token. So only launch a token if like you absolutely think it is necessary. If there's any way you can wiggle out of launching a token, like wiggle out of it. If there's any way you can like use another system, use the other system. Do not launch a token for the sake of launching a token. Would be like my advice. And I would say that 99% of tokens are launched are completely unrequired. Like they're not needed. There's very few systems that actually need a token. Part of the reasons there's so many tokens and, everyone's so willing to sort of make a bespoke token for their system actually comes from the fact that very few systems can generate throughput required to actually create like the settlement rails for a real value economy, right? So if it's like, I'm going to do some sort of decentralized like AWS or whatever, AI. You could hypothetically use Ethereum, but the problem is the fees like are too expensive. The thing is too slow to like use Ethereum as like the monetary layer in your decentralized AI system. So you can't use it. Now, does a decentralized AI system in most constructions require a token? If you had a digital token that could scale, the answer is no. You don't need like a bespoke application token unless every token in existence can't do the thing that functions as money. But I wouldn't launch tokens specific to an application that is meant to function as money in that application only. Like I think we are moving past that. And I think all of those tokens are going to like struggle going forward. Would be my one other recommendation. Do not launch a token if you don't have to launch a token, and figure out any other possible way to solve the problem than launching a token if you can possibly avoid it.
I think those are some fascinating insights. I think thank you for answering questions and critical questions and FUD and, helping everybody learn from mistakes that you made or things that happened in the past or what you've learned going through all this. So, Dr. K, appreciate it.
Appreciate it, man.
We'll tune in for the last episode soon.